The moment froze time. Anthony Hamilton, rising from his VIP seat at Monaco, face ashen as he stared at his phone. Without a word to anyone, Lewis Hamilton's father walked out while his son raced toward victory, leaving millions wondering why a man who had sacrificed everything for his son's success would abandon the most important race of the year. The truth would shatter hearts worldwide. The roar of engines filled the air at the Monaco Grand Prix. 20 powerful Formula One cars zipped through the narrow streets of Monte Carlo like colorful bullets. The famous track, with its tight corners and tunnel, was considered the most challenging in all of racing. In the Mercedes garage, team members watched screens showing every angle of the race. Their star driver, Lewis Hamilton, was fighting for position, currently in 4th place, but gaining ground with each lap. "He's looking good today," said Toto Wolff, the team principal, his eyes fixed on the monitors. "If he keeps this pace, he could take the lead before the pit stops." Up in the VIP section, Anthony Hamilton sat watching his son race. Unlike the excited fans around him, Anthony's face showed worry. He checked his phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes, then returned his attention to the track. At 49 years old, Anthony still had the strong build of a man who had once installed computer networks for a living before dedicating his life to his son's racing career. Today, though, he looked tired. Dark circles hung under his eyes, and he hadn't smiled once all day. "Lewis is flying out there," said a team member who sat next to Anthony. "He might actually win this one." Anthony nodded, but said nothing. On the track below, Lewis guided his silver Mercedes through the famous hairpin turn with perfect precision. Anthony had taught him that move on a go-kart track in England nearly 30 years ago. The memory should have made him proud, but today it just made his chest feel tight. His phone buzzed. Anthony's hand shook slightly as he reached for it. The message was short, just 3 lines of text, but, as he read it, all the color drained from his face. "No," he whispered. "Not now. Not like this." On the track, Lewis was engaged in a wheel-to-wheel battle with Max Verstappen's Red Bull car. The two rivals raced within inches of each other, neither giving an inch. The crowd gasped as they nearly touched, going into Rascasse corner. But Anthony wasn't watching anymore. He stood up suddenly, knocking his program to the floor. The people around him looked up in surprise. "Mr. Hamilton, is everything okay?" asked a team staff member. Anthony didn't answer. He stuffed his phone in his pocket and began moving toward the exit, bumping against the knees of other spectators. As he pushed his way out of the row, "Sir, the race is only halfway done," said a confused usher. "I have to go," Anthony mumbled, not making eye contact. His breathing was rapid now, almost panicky. 2 rows behind, Martin Brundle, the famous commentator, noticed the commotion. He was off-air during this segment, but quickly spoke into his microphone. "Something's happening in the Mercedes VIP section. Anthony Hamilton is leaving, yes, leaving in the middle of the race. This is highly unusual. Can we get a camera on?" "That!" The television director quickly cut to a shot of Anthony pushing through the exit door. Millions of viewers worldwide saw the troubled look on his face as he disappeared from view. In the commentary box, David Croft picked up the story. "We're seeing something very strange here at Monaco. Lewis Hamilton's father and former manager, Anthony Hamilton, appears to have abruptly left the track facilities. As longtime fans know, Anthony rarely misses a moment of his son's races. One has to wonder if there's been some family emergency." Social media exploded instantly with speculation. Did they have a fight before the race? Maybe he can't watch because he's too nervous. Something must be seriously wrong for a father to walk out on his son like that. In the cockpit of his race car, Lewis remained completely focused. His world had narrowed to just the track ahead, the pressure of his foot on the pedal, and the grip of his hands on the wheel. At 240 kilometers per hour, there was no room for distraction. He had no idea that his father had just walked out, no clue about the drama unfolding off the track. "Hamilton is now just 2 seconds behind the leader," announced the race commentator. "With 15 laps to go, he's in perfect position to make a move." Outside the circuit, Anthony stumbled into the bright Mediterranean sunshine. His face was wet. Whether from sweat or tears, it wasn't clear. A few photographers spotted him and began snapping pictures. "Anthony, what's wrong? Why are you leaving?" one shouted. He raised a hand to block their cameras and quickened his pace. A waiting taxi pulled up, and he practically fell into the back seat. "Hospital," he said to the driver. "Princess Grace Hospital. Please hurry." As the taxi pulled away, Anthony took one last look at the massive Monaco circuit behind him, the place where his son was having one of his best races of the season, the place he never thought he'd walk away from, not while Lewis was still driving. He pulled out his phone and stared at the message again, the words blurring as his eyes filled with tears. 25 years of supporting his son through every race, every qualifying session, every triumph and disappointment. He had never once walked away, until today. In the Mercedes garage, Toto noticed the commotion on one of the side monitors showing the VIP section. "What's happening there?" he asked, pointing. "Sir, it appears Anthony Hamilton has left the track," a team member replied quietly. "Left? In the middle of the race? Did he say why?" "No explanation, sir. He just got up and walked out. He looked upset," Toto frowned. "Don't mention this on the radio. Lewis needs to stay focused. We'll deal with it after the race." Back on the track, oblivious to the drama surrounding his father, Lewis Hamilton prepared for the most important laps of the race. His car was performing perfectly, his mind was clear, and victory was within reach. He had no idea that by the time he reached the checkered flag, his world would be turned upside down. No idea that the man who had started this journey with him, who had bought him his first go-kart, who had worked 4 jobs to fund his early racing, who had been there for every important moment of his career, had just walked away when Lewis needed him most, and no idea about the heartbreaking reason why. Stevenage, England, 1991. The morning air was cold as Anthony Hamilton pulled his old Ford Escort into the driveway of their modest home. He had just finished his night shift at the British Rail, his second job of the day. In a few hours, he would head to his computer installation work. But first, there was something important to do. 8-year-old Lewis Hamilton sat on the front steps, already dressed and waiting. His eyes lit up when he saw his father's car. "Dad, you're back!" Lewis jumped up, bouncing with excitement. Anthony smiled despite his exhaustion. "I told you I would be, didn't I? Today's a big day." He opened the car trunk and pulled out a large box. It was wrapped in simple newspaper, not fancy gift paper. They couldn't afford fancy things. Is that what I think it is?" Lewis whispered, his eyes wide. "Open it and see," Anthony said, placing the heavy box on the ground. Lewis tore into the newspaper wrapping. Inside was a second-hand go-kart, its red paint scratched in places, but still bright. It wasn't new, but to Lewis, it was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "My very own cart," he screamed, running his hands over the steering wheel. "Can we try it now? Please, Dad?" "Not today, champ. I've got to sleep a bit before my next job," Anthony said. "But this weekend, we'll take it to the track. I promise." That weekend, at the Rye House Kart Circuit, Lewis sat in his go-kart, for the first time. The helmet Anthony had bought him was slightly too big, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the feeling of freedom as he gripped the steering wheel. "Remember what I showed you," Anthony said, kneeling beside the cart. "Smooth on the throttle. Don't fight the steering. Feel the cart talking to you." Louis nodded, seriously. "I'll make you proud, Dad." Anthony held out his hand in a fist. Louis bumped it with his own smaller fist. Then they both opened their hands and wiggled their fingers. It was their special handshake, one they had created together. "You already make me proud," Anthony said. "Now go show them what a Hamilton can do." That first day, Louis finished last in every race. But he didn't cry or complain. He asked questions, listened to his father's advice, and got back in the cart again and again. By the end of the year, Louis was winning races. Anthony was always there, serving as mechanic, coach, manager, and biggest fan. He carried toolboxes, changed tires, and tweaked engines, learning everything he could about racing. "Dad, how do you know so much about karts?" Louis asked one day as Anthony fixed a broken chain. "I don't," Anthony admitted with a laugh. "I'm learning as we go, but that's what fathers do. We figure things out for our children." The years passed. Anthony took on additional jobs: computer technician during the day, security guard on weekends, and whatever else he could find. Every penny went to Louis's racing career. Some nights, when money was tight, Anthony slept in his car at racetracks to save on hotel costs. He never told Louis about these sacrifices. He just showed up each morning, ready with tools and advice. By the time Louis was 12, he was the British cadet karting champion. A photo from that day showed him holding his trophy, Anthony standing. Behind him, with a hand on his shoulder, both of them grinning like they had conquered the world. "We're just getting started," Anthony told him that night. "One day, you'll race in Formula One. I believe that." "You really think so?" Louis asked, his voice full of wonder. "I know so," Anthony said firmly. "But it won't be easy. We'll have to work harder than everyone else. Are you ready for that?" Louis nodded, his face serious beyond his years. "I'm ready if you're with me." "Always," Anthony promised. "Before every race, I'll be there. Our handshake, remember? That's my promise to you." As Louis entered his teenage years, the sacrifices grew bigger. Anthony remortgaged their home to buy better equipment. He quit one job to travel to European races with Louis. The bills piled up, but so did the trophies. There were times when the pressure almost broke them. After one particularly tough race where Louis crashed out, he found his father sitting alone in their small trailer, head in his hands. "I'm sorry, Dad," Louis said quietly. "I let you down." Anthony looked up, his eyes red but determined. "No, son. You can never let me down by trying your best. But we can't afford many more crashes. The money, it's not easy." Louis sat beside his father. At 14, he was beginning to understand the weight of his dream and the price his father was paying for it. "Should we stop?" Louis asked, though the words hurt to say. "If it's too much." "No," Anthony said firmly. "We're Hamiltons. We don't quit. Tomorrow we race again." And they did. Through rain and shine, victory and defeat, they pushed forward, together. Every morning before a race, they did their special handshake. Every evening, they discussed what Louis could do better. They were more than father and son. They were a team. One day, Anthony told Louis, after he won his first major European championship at 15, "People will know your name. They'll see. A black champion in a sport where there aren't any. You'll change things, Louis. You'll make history." Louis believed him because his father had never lied to him. If Anthony Hamilton said something would happen, it happened, no matter how hard they had to work for it. What neither of them knew then, in those early hungry years of sacrifice and dreams, was how success would test their bond even more than struggle had. Or that one day, Anthony would walk away from his son's biggest race, carrying a secret that would break both their hearts. Formula Renault champion Lewis Hamilton. At 17, Lewis stood on the podium, trophy raised high. Yerv. The team area below, Anthony clapped until his hands hurt. His son wasn't just winning, he was dominating. "We did it, Dad," Lewis said later as they packed up their gear. He still said "we," even though he was the one driving. In his mind, every victory belonged to both of them. "You did it," Anthony corrected him. "I just stand on the sidelines now." But that wasn't entirely true. Anthony was still working as Lewis's manager, negotiating contracts, arranging sponsors, and handling the business side of racing. The financial pressure had eased somewhat with Lewis's success, but Anthony's workload had only increased. McLaren. "Called again," Anthony said as they drove home. "Ron Dennis wants to meet with us next week." Lewis's eyes widened. Ron Dennis was the boss of the McLaren Formula One team, one of the biggest names in racing. "Really? Do you think they might—" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Anthony cautioned, though he couldn't hide his own excitement. "But yes, I think. They're interested in adding you to their young driver program." The meeting with McLaren changed everything. Lewis signed a contract to join their development program, with a clear path to Formula One if he continued to perform. It was what they had dreamed about since that first go-kart ride. The next 3 years passed in a blur of victories. Formula 3, champion. GP2, champion. Each step brought Lewis closer to the ultimate goal. Formula One, then came the call they had been waiting for. January 2007. Lewis was 22 years old. "They're offering you the seat," Anthony said, his voice trembling as he hung up the phone. "McLaren Formula One. You're going to race alongside Fernando Alonso." Lewis couldn't speak. He just hugged his father, both of them crying unashamedly. They had done it. From a second-hand go-kart to the pinnacle of motorsport. A working-class kid from Stevenage and his determined father had broken into a sport dominated by the wealthy. "You know what this means," Anthony said, wiping his eyes. "You'll be the first black driver in Formula One. Ever." Lewis nodded solemnly. "I know. It's bigger than just me now." The weight of that responsibility became clear at Lewis's first race in Australia. Cameras followed him everywhere. Journalists asked questions about his background, his skin color, how it felt to be different in Formula One. "Just focus on the driving," Anthony advised. "Let your talent answer the questions." And Lewis did. He finished on the podium in his very first race, shocking the Formula One world. By mid-season, he was leading the championship, fighting against his teammate Alonso, a 2-time world champion. The pressure was immense. At race after race, Lewis and Anthony faced scrutiny unlike anything they had experienced before. Some people in the paddock whispered that Lewis didn't belong, that he had been promoted too quickly, that his success was just luck. "They're just not used to someone like me winning," Lewis said, after overhearing a comment in the garage. Anthony squeezed his son's shoulder. "Then keep winning until they get used to it." Success brought new challenges to their relationship too. For the first time, they weren't struggling together against the world. Now there were team managers, engineers, PR people, and sponsors all wanting Lewis's attention. Anthony found himself pushed to the background more often. After a difficult race in China, where Lewis slid off the track while entering the pit lane, costing him valuable championship points, they had their first serious argument. "You shouldn't have pushed so hard in those conditions," Anthony said in the hotel room afterward. "I know how to drive, Dad," Lewis snapped, then immediately looked regretful. There was an uncomfortable silence. They had never spoken to each other like that before. "I'm sorry," Lewis said. "I'm just frustrated." "Me too," Anthony admitted. "It's different now. Bigger. Sometimes I feel like I don't know how to help you anymore." Despite the setbacks, Lewis finished an incredible second in the championship in his rookie year. At the McLaren Christmas party, Ron Dennis raised a toast. "To Lewis and Anthony Hamilton," he said, "the most dedicated father-son team in motorsport." Everyone applauded, but Anthony felt a strange sense of worry. As Lewis's star continued to rise, he wondered how long they could remain a team, how long his son would need him. Neither of them could have imagined that the day would come when Lewis would race without Anthony watching, or that Anthony would keep a devastating secret from the son he had always protected, even as it tore him apart from the inside. The 2010 Formula One season was about to begin. Lewis Hamilton, now a world champion after his incredible 2008 victory with McLaren, sat in his apartment in Monaco. Across from him was his father, Anthony. The tension between them was thick enough to touch. "I need to tell you something, Dad," Lewis said, his voice quiet but firm. "I've been thinking about this for a long time." Anthony set down his cup of tea. Something in his son's tone told him this wasn't going to be an ordinary conversation. "What is it?" he asked. Lewis took a deep breath. "I think it's time we ended our professional relationship. I need to find my own manager." The words hung in the air. Anthony's face showed no reaction at first, as if he hadn't quite heard what Lewis said. Then his expression crumpled slightly before he controlled it. "You're firing me?" he asked, the hurt evident in his voice despite his attempt to hide it. "No, not firing," Lewis said quickly. "That's not how I see it. It's just, I'm 25. Now, I need to stand on my own. Make my own decisions." Anthony stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Mediterranean sparkled in the sunshine, a perfect Monaco day. But he didn't see any of it. "Is this because of what happened in Australia?" he asked, referring to an argument they'd had after the previous race, where Anthony had criticized Lewis's driving style in front of team members. "It's not one thing," Lewis explained. "It's everything. Formula One is different from karting or the junior categories. The pressures, the politics. I need to find my own way through it." What Lewis didn't say was how difficult it had become to be both son and client. How team meetings turned awkward when Anthony spoke for him. How other drivers raised eyebrows at a grown man still managed by his father. "I see," Anthony said finally. He turned back to face his son, his expression carefully neutral. "And when does this take effect?" "Immediately," Lewis said. "I've already spoken with 19th Entertainment. Simon Fuller's team will handle my management from now on." Anthony nodded slowly. The fact that Lewis had already arranged everything without telling him hurt more than the decision itself. "Well then," he said, picking up his jacket. "I suppose there's nothing left to discuss." "Dad, wait," Lewis called as Anthony headed for the door. "This doesn't change anything between us as father and son. I still need you at the races, still want your advice." Anthony paused, his hand on the doorknob. "Does it change things?" "Of course it does, Lewis. For 17 years, racing has been what we do together. It's been our life. But it doesn't have to be everything," Lewis insisted. "Maybe now we can just be father and son, without the business side getting in the way." Anthony didn't respond. He simply opened the door and walked out, leaving Lewis alone in his apartment. For the first time in his racing career, truly alone. The separation wasn't easy for either of them. At the next race in Bahrain, Anthony didn't attend. It was the first time Lewis had raced without his father present since he was 8 years old. The pre-race routine felt wrong without their special handshake. Lewis finished third, but the podium celebration felt hollow without seeing his father's proud face in the garage. In the press conference afterward, a journalist asked about Anthony's absence. "My father and I have decided to take a different direction professionally," Lewis answered carefully. "But he's still my dad, and I'm sure he'll be at races soon." But Anthony didn't come to the next race either, or the one after that. The phone calls between them became shorter, more formal. The easy conversation they once shared was replaced by awkward silences. Meanwhile, Lewis's new management team transformed his public image. New sponsors, fashion photo shoots, celebrity friends. Lewis Hamilton became more than just a racing driver. He became a global brand. By mid-season, when Anthony finally returned to watch a race, Lewis hardly had time to speak with him. There were always interviews to do, sponsors to meet, parties to attend. "You look tired," Anthony commented when they finally had a moment alone in the paddock. "I'm fine," Lewis replied automatically. "How have you been? How's the family?" They spoke like acquaintances rather than father and son. The gap between them had grown into a chasm neither knew how to cross. In 2013, Lewis made another big decision. Without consulting his father, he left McLaren to join Mercedes. Anthony found out through the news like everyone else. "You could have told me," Anthony said during a rare phone call. "Would you have approved?" Lewis asked. "Probably not," Anthony admitted. "McLaren made you a champion. That's why I didn't tell you. I needed to make this choice for myself." The move to Mercedes, which many criticized at the time, proved to be brilliant. By 2014, Lewis was winning races consistently. By 2015, he had his second world championship, then a third in 2016, a fourth. In 2017, and by 2020, he had matched Michael Schumacher's record of 7 world titles. Through it all, Anthony watched from a distance. He attended races occasionally, but they never recaptured the closeness they once had. Lewis had his own life now, his own team of people around him. Anthony was just a visitor in that world. After Lewis won his 7th championship, Anthony sent a text message. "Congratulations. Your mother and I are very proud." Lewis replied with a simple, "Thank you." Both men had changed. Lewis had grown from a shy boy into a confident champion, who used his platform to speak out about racial injustice and environmental causes. Anthony had built a new life coaching young drivers, trying to give them the guidance he had once given his son. Neither could have predicted how completely their paths would diverge, or that in Monaco 2025, as Lewis fought for another victory, Anthony would receive news that would make racing, the thing that had once defined their relationship, suddenly seem completely unimportant. The world saw Lewis Hamilton as a superhero. 7 world championships, over 100 race wins, millions of fans, designer clothes, private jet, famous friends. But inside, Lewis often felt alone. Another amazing race, Lewis. His race engineers. Voice crackled over the radio as Lewis crossed the finish line at Silverstone in 2022, winning his home Grand Prix for the 9th time. The crowd roared as he climbed from his car, Union Jack flag in hand. He went through the motions of celebration, spraying champagne, waving to fans, thanking his team, but something was missing. In the cool-down room before the podium ceremony, Lewis checked his phone. No message from Anthony. He hadn't expected one, but he still looked every time. Their last real conversation had been 3 months earlier, at his mother's birthday dinner. Even then, they had spoken mostly about the weather and football, safe topics that wouldn't lead to tension. "Your father asks about you, you know," his mother had told him privately. "He watches every race." "He could call me," Lewis had replied. "So could you," she pointed out gently. But neither did. Pride and hurt feelings created walls that grew higher with each passing year. After the Silverstone victory, Lewis sat alone in his motorhome, staring at his trophy. Outside, his team celebrated. Inside, he felt a familiar emptiness. He thought about calling Anthony. Surely a win at their home Grand Prix would be reason enough. His finger hovered over the phone, but he put it down. What would he even say after all this time? Instead, he did what he often did when feeling low. He wrote in his journal. Racing thoughts had always plagued Lewis, and writing helped calm his mind. Tonight, he wrote about his father, about missing the days when racing was simpler and they faced the world together. The 2023 season brought new challenges. Rule changes made the Mercedes car difficult to drive. For the first time in years, Lewis struggled to win races. Critics questioned if, at 38, he was past his prime. "Hamilton's time is over," screamed the newspaper headlines. The pressure mounted. Lewis found solace in his other passions: fashion, music, his dogs. He spoke out more boldly about causes he believed in: racial equality, environmental protection, human rights. His voice grew stronger even as his racing results weakened. Some fans turned against him. "Stick to driving," they commented on his social media posts about racism or climate change. "I can't just be quiet," Lewis told a reporter who asked if his activism was hurting his focus. "There are more important things than winning races." It was during this difficult period that Lewis began seeing a therapist. She helped him understand that some of his drive came from seeking validation, from the world, but especially from his father. "You became a champion to make him proud," the therapist suggested in one session. "What are you driving for now?" The question haunted Lewis. What was he driving for? The records were broken. The championships won. His legacy was secure. Was it habit? Passion? Or was he still, deep down, hoping to earn back the closeness he once had with Anthony? In late 2023, after a particularly frustrating race in Brazil, Lewis did something he hadn't done in years. He called his father. Anthony answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. "Lewis, is everything all right?" "Not really," Lewis admitted. "The car's a mess. I can't make it work." There was a pause. Then Anthony asked, "What's it doing in the corners?" Just like that, they were talking about racing again. Technical details, driving techniques. For 30 minutes, it was almost like old times. "You're overdriving," Anthony said finally. "I can see it. You're trying too hard. Remember what I taught you as a kid. Let the car come to you." "I remember," Lewis said softly. "You'll figure it out," Anthony assured him. "You always do." The call ended awkwardly, neither quite knowing how to say goodbye. But something had shifted. A tiny crack in the wall between them. After that call, Lewis drove differently, more patiently, more confidently. He won the next race in Abu Dhabi, his first victory in months. In his winner's interview, Lewis said something that made headlines. "I want to thank my dad. He reminded me of some important lessons." Watching on television at home in England, Anthony smiled for the first time in a long time. They didn't suddenly become close again. Years of distance couldn't be fixed with one phone call, but they started. Texting occasionally, brief messages, race observations. Congratulations, after good results. When Lewis's beloved dog Roscoe fell ill in early 2024, Anthony sent a care package with Roscoe's favorite treats. When Anthony's mother, Lewis's grandmother, passed away, Lewis flew home immediately for the funeral. They stood side by side, grieving together but still awkward around each other. "She was always proud of you," Anthony said as they left the cemetery. "She was proud of both of us," Lewis corrected him. The 2024 season brought renewed success for Lewis. The Mercedes team had finally solved their car problems. Lewis was winning again, fighting for an unprecedented 8th World Championship. Racing. Journalists wrote about Hamilton's remarkable comeback and the aging champion's final chapter. At 39, Lewis was now the oldest driver on the grid, but he was driving better than ever. During a rare father-son dinner after Lewis won, in Spain, Anthony noticed something different about his son. "You seem calmer now," he observed. "I am," Lewis agreed. "I'm not trying to prove anything anymore. I'm just driving because I love it." Anthony nodded. "That's how it was when you started, before the pressure, before I—" He didn't finish the thought, but Lewis understood. Before the management issues, before the expectations, before success pulled them apart. "I miss those days sometimes," Lewis admitted. "Me too," Anthony said quietly. It wasn't an apology from either of them. It wasn't a full reconciliation. But it was honesty, something they hadn't shared in a long time. As the 2025 season began, Lewis was leading the championship again. Anthony started attending races more regularly, though they still maintained a certain distance. They were finding a new way to be father and son, not as close as before, but not as far apart either. Then came Monaco, the crown jewel of Formula One. Lewis arrived feeling confident. Anthony arrived harboring a secret that would change everything. Neither could have imagined that their carefully rebuilt relationship was about to face its greatest test, or that the text message Anthony would receive halfway through the race would make him do the unthinkable: walk away when his son needed him most. January 2025. "Mr. Hamilton, please take a seat." Anthony sat stiffly in the doctor's office in London. The room was too warm, or maybe it was just his nerves. The doctor's expression gave nothing away as she looked at the file in front of her. "I have your test results," she said, her voice gentle. "I'm afraid it's not good news." Anthony felt his heart pound against his ribs. He had come in for a routine checkup after feeling unusually tired for weeks. He'd blamed it on the cold English winter, on stress, on getting older. "Nothing serious." "How not good?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The blood work and scans show advanced pancreatic cancer. It's already spread to your liver." The words hit Anthony like physical blows. Cancer. Advanced. Spread. Each word carried the weight of everything he might lose. "What are my options?" he asked, reverting to the practical mindset that had helped him navigate Lewis's racing career through all the hard years. The doctor explained treatments, chemotherapy, radiation, possible surgery. But her tone told Anthony what her words didn't. His chances weren't good. As he left the hospital that day, Anthony's first thought was of Lewis. They had only recently started rebuilding their relationship. How could he tell his son that he might not have much time left? Lewis was fighting for another championship. This news would devastate him, distract him. "I won't tell him yet," Anthony decided, speaking aloud to himself in his car. "Not until, after the season, he needs to focus." So began Anthony's secret battle. 3 days a week, he would go to the hospital for treatment. The chemicals pumped into his body left him nauseous and weak. His hair thinned, his clothes hung looser on his frame, but on race weekends he put on a brave face. He applied makeup to hide the pallor of his skin. He wore hats to cover his thinning hair. He timed his pain medications perfectly so he could appear strong and healthy when Lewis might see him. "You're looking a bit thin, Dad," Lewis remarked after the Australian Grand Prix in March. "Everything okay?" "Just watching my diet," Anthony lied smoothly. "Doctor says I need to take care of my heart at my age." Lewis seemed to accept this explanation. He was preoccupied with his own concerns. The title battle was fierce, with Max Verstappen pushing him hard in every race. By April, the treatments were taking a heavier toll. Anthony could barely get out of bed some days. His doctors spoke in increasingly somber tones during his checkups. "The cancer isn't responding as we'd hoped," his oncologist explained. "We need to try a more aggressive approach." The new treatment was brutal. Anthony lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. He couldn't keep food down. The pain became a constant companion. Still, he told no one in the family. Not Lewis, not his other children, not even his wife. "They have their own lives to live," he told his nurse one day when she urged him to share his burden. "Lewis has enough pressure right now. But secrets this big are hard to keep." At the Spanish Grand Prix in early May, Anthony nearly collapsed in the paddock. A Mercedes team doctor helped him to a private room. "This isn't just exhaustion," the doctor said, after examining him. "You're seriously ill." Anthony swore the doctor to secrecy, using the last of his famous persuasiveness. "Lewis needs to win this race. Please don't distract him." The doctor reluctantly agreed, but insisted Anthony see a specialist in Barcelona immediately. The Spanish doctor's assessment was bleak. "The treatments are not working," he said in careful English. "I would suggest you consider quality of life now over quantity. In other words, prepare for the end." That weekend, Lewis noticed something was wrong. He found his father sitting alone in the team hospitality area, staring at nothing. "Dad? You okay?" Anthony snapped back to attention, pulling his public mask back on. "Fine, just tired. Jet lag." "You know, you don't have to come to every race," Lewis said. "It's a long season." Anthony smiled sadly. "I want to be here. These moments, they're important." Something in his father's tone made Lewis look closer. "Are you sure everything's okay? You seem different lately." For a brief moment, Anthony considered telling the truth. The words formed in his mind. "I'm dying, Lewis. The cancer is winning." But looking at his son's face, focused, determined, on the verge of making history with an 8th world title, he couldn't do it. "Just getting old," he said instead. "But I've got some advice for you about this track. The temperatures are affecting tire wear more than usual. If you're gentle through turns 3 and 4, you'll have more grip in the final sector." Just like that, they were back to racing talk. Lewis listened carefully to his father's observations. At 40, he was a seasoned champion, but he still valued Anthony's unique perspective. The next day, Lewis followed his father's advice about the tires. He took pole position by 0.3 of a second. "That was for you, Dad," he said, when they met briefly after qualifying. "Your tip about the tires was spot on." They shared a quick hug. Anthony held on a moment longer than usual, knowing these moments were precious and numbered. After Spain came Monaco, the crown jewel of Formula One. Anthony wasn't sure he had the strength to attend, but he couldn't bear the thought of missing what might be his last chance to see Lewis race there. He arrived in Monte Carlo, looking gaunt, but elegant, in a tailored suit that hid how much weight he'd lost. His medication kept the pain manageable, but the doctors had warned him his condition was deteriorating rapidly. Any day now, the specialist in London had told him, you should prepare your family. Anthony had nodded, but made no promises. He still couldn't bring himself to burden Lewis with this knowledge. Then came race day in Monaco. As Lewis prepared, his car on the grid, Anthony received a text message from his doctor in London. The latest test results were in. The news was worse than he had feared, much worse. And suddenly, sitting in the Mercedes VIP section as the cars roared to life below, Anthony Hamilton knew he couldn't keep his secret any longer. 3 days before the Monaco Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton arrived at his apartment overlooking the harbor. Monaco had been his home for over a decade, but this place never felt as much like home as the modest house in Stevenage where he grew up. Lewis tossed his bags in the bedroom and walked out onto the balcony. Below, workers were finishing the race barriers along the famous street circuit. The familiar excitement of Monaco Race Week bubbled through the city. His phone rang. The screen showed Dad calling. "Hey, Dad," Lewis answered. "You in Monaco yet?" "Just landed," Anthony replied, his voice sounding tired. "The team arranged a car for me." "You could have flown with me," Lewis said. "I had plenty of room on the pole." "Jet." There was a pause. "Next time, maybe." It was the kind of awkward moment that still popped up between them, despite their improved relationship. Some walls had come down, but others remained firmly in place. "Where are you staying?" Lewis asked. "The Fairmont. That's only 10 minutes from me. Want to have dinner tonight?" "Just us?" Another pause. "Sure, that would be nice." Lewis suggested Rampoldi, an old Monaco restaurant known for privacy. Celebrities could dine there without cameras or interruptions. They agreed to meet at 8 when Anthony arrived at the restaurant. Lewis was shocked by his appearance. His father had always been a strong, solid presence. Now he looked thin, almost fragile. His clothes, normally perfectly fitted, hung loosely on his frame. "Dad, you've lost so much weight," Lewis said as they sat down. Anthony waved away the concern. "Just that diet I mentioned. It's working too well, maybe." Lewis didn't believe him, but he didn't push. Their relationship was still too fragile for confrontation. The waiter brought menus. Anthony barely glanced at his before ordering just a soup. Lewis frowned but said nothing as he ordered his own meal. "How are you feeling about the race?" Anthony asked, changing the subject. "The car looked good in Barcelona." Lewis sipped his water. "The balance isn't right for Monaco. The car's too stiff for the bumps. I fought with the engineers about it yesterday." "What's their solution?" "They want to run a higher ride height, but that'll cost downforce in the tunnel section." Anthony shook his head. "They're wrong. Monaco is all about driver confidence. If you're not comfortable, you'll never find the limit. Better to be slightly slower on paper, but have a car you can trust." Lewis nodded. His father still understood racing at a fundamental level. "That's what I told them. They didn't listen." "Make them listen," Anthony said firmly. "You're a 7-time world champion. They work for you, not the other way around." There was an edge to Anthony's voice that surprised Lewis. His father rarely spoke so bluntly anymore. "It's not that simple," Lewis replied. "Racing is different now. Everything is data-driven. The computers say—" "The computers don't drive the car," Anthony interrupted. "You do. That's something I taught you when you were 8 years old, and it's still true today." Lewis felt a flash of annoyance. This was exactly why their professional relationship had ended years ago. Anthony's stubborn insistence that his way was right, his inability to adapt to how Formula One had changed. "Dad, I know you mean well, but—" But you think I don't understand modern Formula One, Anthony finished for him. You think I'm out of touch. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The waiter arrived with their food, breaking the tension. Lewis's plate was full of colorful vegetables and grilled fish. Anthony's soup looked thin and unappetizing. Is that all you're eating? Lewis asked. Not very hungry these days. Lewis put down his fork. Dad, what's really going on with you? And don't say it's just a diet. You look ill. Anthony stared at his soup. For a moment, it seemed he might finally tell the truth. Lewis could see the struggle playing out on his father's face. Then, Anthony's expression hardened. I'm fine, he said firmly. Just tired from traveling. Let's talk about something else. Lewis wanted to argue but held back. Instead, they ate in uncomfortable silence for several minutes. How's your mother? Anthony finally asked. She's good. Worried about you, actually. She says you haven't been answering her calls. Anthony looked guilty. I've been busy. Too busy for Mom? That's not like you. Another silence fell between them. Lewis felt like they were strangers sharing a table, not father and son with a lifetime of history. Remember our first time in Monaco? Anthony asked suddenly, his voice softer. 2007, your rookie season. Lewis smiled despite himself. You were so excited. More than me, even. I kept telling everyone who would listen, that's my son out there. And you nearly fell into the harbor trying to take photos. They both laughed, the tension easing slightly. For a brief moment, they were connected again through shared memories. You were fearless, Anthony said, overtaking into corners where no one else would dare. I was just doing what you taught me, Lewis replied, finding gaps others couldn't see. Anthony's eyes grew distant. I was so proud that day. Still am. The simple words meant more to Lewis than all his trophies. His father's pride had been the driving force of his career for so long. But the moment passed quickly. Anthony checked his watch and grimaced slightly, as if in pain. Are you sure you're okay? Lewis asked again. Just tired, Anthony insisted, though his face had grown pale. I should probably head back to the hotel. Big day tomorrow with practice. Sessions. Lewis signaled for the check, disappointed that their rare dinner together was ending so quickly. As they stood to leave, Anthony swayed slightly, steadying himself against the table. Dad? Lewis moved to help him, but Anthony waved him off. Just stood up too fast. I'm fine. Outside the restaurant, a light rain had begun to fall, unusual for Monaco in May. Lewis offered to drive his father back to his hotel, but Anthony insisted on taking a taxi. I'll see you at the track tomorrow, Anthony said, not quite meeting Lewis's eyes. Dad, Lewis said, stopping him before he could walk away. Whatever's going on, you can tell me. You know that, right? For a heartbreaking moment, Anthony's mask slipped. His eyes filled with a sadness so deep it frightened Lewis. Some burdens aren't meant to be shared, Anthony said quietly, especially not before the most important race of the season. Before Lewis could respond, Anthony turned and walked away into the rain, leaving his son standing alone outside the restaurant, more certain than ever that his father was hiding something serious, something that could change everything between them. Neither could have imagined that in less than 72 hours, a text message would reveal the truth in the worst possible way. Race day in Monaco dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for the most glamorous event on the Formula One calendar. Lewis Hamilton woke early in his apartment. He had slept poorly, his mind troubled by the dinner with his father 2 nights ago. Since then, he had texted Anthony several times, but received only short, vague replies. After a light breakfast and stretching routine, Lewis headed to the circuit. The streets of Monaco were already buzzing with excitement. Fans lined the routes, hoping to catch a glimpse of their favorite drivers. Lewis drove slowly, windows tinted for privacy, lost in thought. Meanwhile, at the Fairmont Hotel, Anthony Hamilton struggled to get ready. The simple act of buttoning his shirt left him breathless and in pain. The medication wasn't working as well anymore. He sat on the edge of the bed, gathering his strength. His phone buzzed with a text from Lewis. "Hope you're feeling better today. See you at the track." Anthony typed back, "On my way soon." He didn't mention that he had barely slept, that the pain had kept him awake most of the night, or that he had been sick twice already this morning. At the Mercedes garage, Lewis went through his normal race preparations. He reviewed data from qualifying, spoke with his engineers, and studied the weather forecast. But his mind kept returning to his father. "Have you seen my dad today?" he asked his personal assistant. "Not yet," she replied. "Want me to check if he's arrived?" Lewis shook his head. "No, it's fine. He'll be here." 2 hours before the race, Anthony finally arrived at the circuit. He had taken extra medication to make it through the day, which made him slightly dizzy, but dulled the worst of the pain. A team member escorted him to the Mercedes hospitality area. Lewis was in the middle of a strategy meeting when Anthony walked in. Their eyes met briefly across the room. Lewis noticed immediately how much effort his father was making to appear normal. The forced smile, the careful way he moved, the slight tremor in his hands that he tried to hide. After the meeting, Lewis approached his father. "You made it," he said. "Wouldn't miss it," Anthony replied. "Big day." "Did you get my texts?" "I was worried." "Sorry." Phone was charging. Lewis knew it was a lie, but didn't challenge it. Instead, he asked, "Want to see the car? They made those changes we talked about." "At dinner." Anthony's face brightened genuinely for the first time. "They listened to you." "To us," Lewis corrected him. "It was your advice, too." They walked together to the garage, moving slowly to accommodate Anthony's pace without making it obvious. The gleaming silver Mercedes was surrounded by mechanics, making final adjustments. "Lower ride height?" Anthony asked, examining the car. Lewis nodded. "And softer suspension. Like you said, driver confidence is more important than what the computers say, especially here." Anthony placed a hand on the car's smooth surface, a gesture of connection to this machine that had been such a big part of their lives. "She looks fast." "She will be," Lewis said confidently. For a brief moment, years fell away. They were just a father and son sharing their passion for racing, like they had been when Lewis was a boy in his first go-kart. The moment ended when Lewis was called, away for the driver's parade. "I've got to go. Will you be okay?" "Of course," Anthony assured him. "I'll be watching from the team area." "We'll talk after the race," Lewis promised. "Properly talk." Anthony nodded, though his eyes held a sadness Lewis couldn't understand. "Good luck out there." Lewis hesitated, then did something they hadn't done in years. He held out his fist, offering their old pre-race handshake. Anthony's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with tears, he quickly blinked away. He completed the ritual. Fist bump, then open hands with wiggling fingers. "Just like old times," Anthony said, his voice thick with emotion. "Maybe some old times are worth bringing back," Lewis replied. As Lewis walked away to join the other drivers, Anthony watched his son, no longer the small boy he had taught to race, but a grown man who had exceeded even his wildest dreams. "I'm proud of you," Anthony whispered, too quietly for Lewis to hear. The driver's parade, pre-race interviews, and final preparations passed in a blur. Before long, It was time for the race. 20 drivers settled into their cockpits, engines roaring to life. In the Mercedes team area, Anthony found his seat. Team members greeted him warmly. He was a familiar and respected figure in the paddock, the father who had sacrificed everything to help his son reach the top. "Looking good for Lewis today," Toto Wolff, the team principal, commented as he passed by. "Starting fourth, but the car has pace." Anthony nodded, conserving his energy. Every minute was becoming a struggle now. The noise, the heat, the people, pressing around. It all intensified the pain that clawed at his insides. But he was determined to be here for Lewis. The 5 red lights came on one by one. Anthony leaned forward, focused entirely on his son's silver car. Lights out. The race began. 20 of the world's fastest cars surged toward the first corner. Lewis made a good start, nearly taking third position, but wisely backing out when the gap closed. "Careful, but confident," Anthony murmured approvingly. Just as they had discussed, the early laps unfolded without major incident. Lewis settled into fourth place, keeping pace with the leaders while preserving his tires. Anthony recognized the patient strategy. Wait for others to make mistakes, or wear out their tires, then strike. It was working perfectly. By lap 20, Lewis had moved into third when the second-place car pitted early. The Mercedes team's strategy was playing out beautifully. Anthony felt a moment of pure joy watching his son drive with such skill and precision. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, the uncertainty of his future, this moment reminded him why he had devoted his life to Lewis's racing career. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. Anthony's hand trembled as he reached for it, a sense of dread washing over him. The message was from his doctor in London. As he read the text, the world around him seemed to fade away. The roaring engines, the cheering crowd, even his son's race. None of it mattered anymore. In that moment, Anthony Hamilton knew what he had to do. The text message was short but devastating. Final test results confirmed treatment ineffective. Cancer spreading rapidly to lungs. Recommend immediate hospitalization. Please call urgently. Anthony read it twice, his hands shaking. Around him, the Monaco Grand Prix continued. Engines screaming, fans cheering, commentators narrating the battle on track. But to Anthony, it all seemed distant, as if he were underwater. 6 months, they had originally told him. Maybe a year with aggressive treatment. But this message changed everything. Days, not months. Maybe weeks, if he was lucky. He looked up at the track, where Lewis was expertly guiding his Mercedes through the famous Casino Square section. His son was driving beautifully, exactly as they had discussed. 25 years of their lives had built toward moments like this. Lewis Hamilton, 7-time world champion, showing why he was considered the greatest driver of his generation. Anthony had promised himself he would be strong for Lewis, that he wouldn't let his illness affect his son's racing. But now, sitting in the Mercedes VIP section with the terrible news burning in his pocket, Anthony felt something break inside him. For the first time since Lewis was a small boy falling off his bike, Anthony Hamilton couldn't stop the tears that filled his eyes. He blinked rapidly, trying to control himself, but it was no use. The overwhelming reality of his situation crashed down upon him like a physical weight. He was dying. Soon. And he couldn't bear for Lewis to see him like this. A team member sitting nearby noticed something was wrong. "Mr. Hamilton, are you all right?" Anthony couldn't answer. He couldn't speak. If he opened his mouth, he feared he would break down completely. Instead, he stood up suddenly, nearly knocking over his chair. "Sir, the race is only halfway through," the team member said, confused. Anthony shook his head and began moving toward the exit. People stared as he pushed past, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned. His legs felt weak, barely supporting him as he stumbled toward the door. "Mr. Hamilton, wait! Is something wrong?" A Mercedes staff member tried to stop him, reaching for his arm. Anthony pulled away. "I need to go," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please don't tell Lewis. Let him finish the race." "But sir, are you ill? Do you need medical assistance?" Anthony didn't answer. He pushed through the exit door into the corridor beyond. His only thought now was to get away before his emotions overwhelmed him completely, before Lewis or the cameras could see him fall apart. In the TV commentary box above the track, David Croft was calling the race when movement in the Mercedes area caught his attention. "Something unusual happening in the Mercedes hospitality section," he said into his microphone. "It appears Anthony Hamilton, Lewis's father, is leaving the circuit. Yes, he's definitely walking out while the race is still going on." Beside him, Martin Brundle added, "That's extremely odd. Anthony rarely misses a moment of Lewis's races, especially not mid-race. I hope everything is okay." Television directors quickly cut to a shot of Anthony pushing through the paddock, his face contorted with emotion. The image was broadcast to millions of viewers worldwide. In living rooms across the globe, fans leaned forward, suddenly more interested in the drama off-track than the racing action. Did they have a fight? Is he sick? Why would a father walk out during his son's race? Social media exploded with speculation. Within minutes, our Anthony Hamilton was trending worldwide. Outside in the paddock, Anthony moved as quickly as his weakened body would allow. Photographers who normally focused on the track now turned their cameras on him. Flashes popped around him as he tried to shield his face. "Anthony! What happened? Why are you leaving?" shouted one journalist, who recognized him. "Is there a problem with Lewis? With the team?" called another. Anthony kept walking, head down. Security personnel, seeing his distress, moved to block the media's access. A team representative appeared at his side. "Mr. Hamilton, please let us help you. We can arrange private transport, medical, assistance, whatever you need." "Just a taxi," Anthony said, his voice breaking. "Please." The representative spoke briefly into a radio, then guided Anthony toward a back exit, where vehicles could access the otherwise locked-down circuit. Within minutes, a black Mercedes pulled up. "Where to, sir?" asked the driver as Anthony collapsed. "Into the back seat." "Princess Grace Hospital," Anthony replied, pulling out his phone to call his doctor in London. As the car pulled away from the circuit, Anthony cast one final glance back at the massive Monaco grandstands. Somewhere in there, Lewis was still racing, completely unaware that his father had just walked out, unaware of the media storm that was already building, unaware that his world was about to change forever. Inside the Mercedes garage, Toto Wolff had been alerted to the situation. He glanced at one of the side monitors showing Anthony's exit, then made a quick decision. "No one mentions this on the radio to Lewis," he instructed the team firmly. "He needs complete focus right now. We'll deal with whatever's happening after the checkered flag." The race engineers nodded in agreement. Lewis was currently running in third position with a real chance of taking the lead during pit stops. Any distraction could be disastrous on the narrow Monaco streets where a moment's lapse in concentration meant hitting the barriers. In the media center, journalists were already piecing together timelines and stories. ESPN, Sky Sports, and F1 TV commentators all discussed the unusual development during gaps in the racing action. "We're getting reports," that Anthony Hamilton left the circuit rather suddenly and appeared to be in distress, reported Ted Kravitz from the pit lane. The Mercedes team is offering no comment at this time, and Lewis Hamilton obviously remains focused on the race, unaware of what's transpired. Back in the taxi, Anthony's phone buzzed with concerned messages from family and friends who had seen the coverage. He ignored them all, focusing instead on the call with his doctor. "The scan shows significant progression," the doctor explained gently. "I'm sorry, Anthony, but we need to adjust our approach. This is now about comfort care rather than treatment." Anthony closed his eyes, trying to process what that meant. No more fighting, no more treatments, just making the most of whatever time remained. As the taxi navigated the narrow Monaco streets, temporarily closed to regular traffic for the race, Anthony could still hear the distant sound of Formula One engines. The sport had been his life's focus for so long, first as Lewis's supporter, then manager, and always as his father. Now, for the first time, he was walking away from it all, because some things were more important than racing, more important than championships, more important even than the special bond between a father and the son he had raised to be a champion. Anthony Hamilton had always taught Lewis to be strong, to face challenges head-on, but this one time he couldn't follow his own advice. This one time he had to walk away. What he didn't know yet was how he would explain that to his son. Lewis Hamilton was in a zone, the kind of mental space that only elite athletes can reach, where everything slows down and becomes crystal clear. His focus was absolute: the track, the car, his competitors. Nothing else existed. Hamilton closing the gap to Verstappen now, just 1.8 seconds behind. His race engineer's voice crackled over the radio. "Keep this pace up. You're faster than him." Lewis didn't reply. He didn't need to. His driving spoke for itself as he navigated the tight Monaco circuit with surgical precision. The car was responding perfectly to his inputs, just as his father had predicted when they lowered the ride height. On lap 43 of 78, Max Verstappen ahead of him made his pit stop. Lewis pushed even harder, knowing his own stop was coming soon. This was the critical phase of the race, where championships could be won or lost. "Box this lap, box this lap," came the instruction from the pit wall. Lewis guided his Mercedes into the narrow Monaco pit lane. The team executed a perfect tire change, 2.1 seconds. As he accelerated back onto the track, his engineer delivered the good news. "You're P2 now, Lewis. Leclerc still ahead, but he needs to stop. Verstappen behind on fresh tires." Outside the car, the world was buzzing about Anthony Hamilton's mysterious exit. Inside the cockpit, Lewis remained blissfully unaware, focused only on hunting down Charles Leclerc's Ferrari ahead. 10 laps later, Leclerc finally pitted. Lewis inherited the lead with 25 laps remaining. Now it was a defensive game. Maintain the gap to Verstappen while preserving the tires tied to souvenir. The finish. It was the kind of challenge Lewis thrived on. With each perfect lap, each precisely judged corner, he built his confidence. The lessons from a lifetime of racing, many taught by the father who had just walked away, were being applied with masterful skill. In the Mercedes garage, tension was high, not just because of the race situation, but because of the secret they were keeping from their driver. Several team members kept glancing nervously at the empty seat where Anthony had been sitting. "Has anyone heard from Anthony?" Toto Wolff asked quietly. "He went to Princess Grace Hospital," a team coordinator replied. "That's all we know." Toto nodded grimly. "Keep it quiet. Lewis needs to focus." Out on track, Lewis was driving one of the races of his life. The Monaco circuit is the most demanding on the calendar. Narrow streets, Armco barriers inches away. No room for even the smallest error. For 78 laps, absolute concentration is required. 10 laps to go, Lewis, his engineer informed him. Verstappen is pushing hard, 1.5 seconds behind. Lewis could see the Red Bull in his mirrors, growing larger as Max closed the gap. The younger driver was renowned for his aggressive racing, always willing to attempt overtakes where others wouldn't dare. In the past, at moments like this, Lewis would occasionally glance at the section where his father always sat. A quick look for reassurance, for that connection that had been there since his karting days. But today, focused entirely on holding. Off Verstappen, he didn't look. With 5 laps remaining, disaster nearly struck. Exiting the tunnel at 175 Mate Pythround, Lewis's car hit a bump he hadn't noticed before. The Mercedes briefly became airborne, landing with a shower of sparks. Lewis corrected. The slide with lightning reflexes, missing the barrier by millimeters. Careful through the tunnel, he reported calmly. Track surface changed. For the final laps, Lewis drove with even more precision. No risks, no mistakes, just the perfect racing line, lap after lap. When he crossed the finish line 0.7 seconds ahead of Verstappen, Lewis raised a fist in triumph. Monaco, the race every driver dreams of winning, was his again. "Get in there, Lewis," his engineer shouted over the radio. "Brilliant drive, absolutely brilliant." "Thank you, guys," Lewis replied, breathing heavily from the physical and mental exertion. Perfect strategy, perfect pit stop. The car came alive after those setup changes. As he took his victory lap, waving to the cheering crowd, Lewis finally allowed himself to look toward the Mercedes section. He expected to see his father standing there, possibly with that rare, huge smile he saved for the most special victories. But Anthony's seat was empty. Lewis frowned slightly, confused, but didn't dwell on it. Perhaps his father had moved to meet him in Parc Fermé, where the top 3 drivers park after the race. He'd see him there, or in the cool-down room before the podium. In the garage, Toto gathered the senior team members. "We need to tell him, before he finds out from someone else," he said grimly. "Tell me what?" They turned to see Lewis entering the garage, still in his race suit, face flushed with victory and exertion. "Where's my dad?" he asked, looking around. Did he already go? To the podium area? The team members exchanged uncomfortable glances. No one wanted to be the one to break the news. Finally, Toto stepped forward. "Lewis, there's something you need to know. Your father left during the race. He appeared to be unwell." Lewis stared at him, not comprehending. "Left? What do you mean, left?" "He left the circuit. Quite suddenly. It's been on the news." Lewis's expression changed from confusion to concern. "Is he okay? Did something happen?" Before Toto could answer, Lewis's phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, saw the caller ID, and his face paled. "It's the Princess Grace Hospital," he said. Lewis stared at his phone, his heartbeat suddenly louder than the celebration around him. The Monaco Grand Prix trophy, the victory he had fought so hard for, no longer mattered. "I have to take this," he said, stepping away from the team. "Hello?" His voice was tight with worry. "Mr. Hamilton? This is Dr. Rousseau from Princess Grace Hospital. I'm calling about your father, Anthony Hamilton." Lewis gripped the phone tighter. "Is he okay? What happened?" "He was admitted about an hour ago. He asked us to wait until after your race to call you." Even now, his father was thinking about his racing. The realization made Lewis's throat tighten. "I'll be right there," he said, ending the call and turning to Toto. I have to go. Dad's in the hospital. The podium ceremony is in 15 minutes, Toto reminded him gently. I don't care, Lewis said, already pulling off his racing gloves. Find someone to take my place. Lewis, you can't miss the podium at Monaco. The prince is waiting. The sponsors, my father is in the hospital. Lewis rarely raised his voice to his team principal, but now his words echoed through the garage. The mechanics around them froze, pretending not to listen. Toto's expression softened. Let me arrange a police escort. You can do the podium quickly, then go straight to the hospital. Lewis wanted to argue but knew Toto was right. Monaco was the most prestigious race of the year. Skipping the podium would cause an international incident. Fine, but make it fast. While changing into his clean race suit for the podium, Lewis tried calling his mother, but there was no answer. She was probably still watching the race coverage, unaware of what had happened with Anthony. The podium ceremony felt like a strange dream. Lewis stood on the top step, champagne in hand, surrounded by cheering fans, but his mind was elsewhere. The Prince of Monaco said something congratulatory. Lewis nodded and smiled automatically, the media training of 2 decades taking over, while his thoughts raced. Why had his father left? What was wrong? The dinner 2 nights ago, Anthony's weight loss, his lack of appetite, the constant tiredness. Suddenly, it all made terrible sense. Lewis! Lewis! The fans chanted his name, but their voices seemed distant. As soon as the ceremony ended, Lewis rushed back to the Mercedes hospitality area, ignoring journalists calling his name. A team security officer met him at the door. Cars ready at the back exit. Police escort arranged. Thank you, Lewis said, grabbing his phone and wallet. Has anyone spoken to the hospital? Do we know anything more? No updates, sir. The streets of Monaco, normally blocked for hours after the race, opened just enough to let Lewis's car through with its police escort. Fans lined the barriers, confused to see the race winner rushing away instead of celebrating. At the hospital entrance, photographers had already gathered, somehow alerted to Anthony's arrival. Camera flashes exploded as Lewis rushed inside. Security. Guards blocking the media from following. I'm here for Anthony Hamilton, he told the receptionist, trying to keep his voice steady. I'm his son. One moment, please. The wait felt eternal. Around him, the hospital continued its normal business. A nurse pushed a wheelchair past. A family huddled together near a vending machine. None of them recognized the Formula One champion still in his racing suit. Or if they did, they respected his privacy in this moment. Finally, a doctor approached. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a serious expression. Mr. Hamilton? I'm Dr. Rousseau. We spoke on the phone. How is he? Can I see him? The doctor gestured toward a quieter corner. Your father is stable for now, but his condition is serious. Before you see him, there are things you should know. Lewis felt his chest tighten. What things? Your father has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. It's metastasized to his liver and lungs. The words hit Lewis like physical blows. Cancer. Stage 4. Metastasized. Each term more frightening than the last. That's not possible, he said automatically. He would have told me. Dr. Rousseau's expression was sympathetic, but firm. He's been receiving treatment in London for several months. Today he received test results indicating the treatment isn't working. The disease is progressing rapidly. Lewis shook his head, trying to process this information. Months? He's known for months? I understand this is a shock. Your father was very clear that he didn't want you to know until after your race. That's why he left, Lewis whispered, more to himself than the doctor. He got the news during the race. He was quite distressed when he arrived, Dr. Rousseau confirmed. We've given him medication to help with the pain and anxiety. Pain? He's in pain? The thought of his father suffering silently, hiding it all this time, was almost unbearable. Pancreatic cancer can be extremely painful. Yes, from his records, it seems he's been managing it with increasingly strong medication. Lewis remembered Anthony's pallor at dinner, the way he grimaced when he stood too quickly, how he barely touched his food. All the signs had been there, but Lewis had been too caught up in his own world to truly see them. How long? Lewis asked, the hardest question of all. How long does he have? Dr. Rousseau hesitated. It's difficult to say precisely. Please, I need to know. Based on the progression shown in today's tests, weeks, possibly, maybe only days. Lewis felt his legs go weak. He reached for the wall to steady himself. Mr. Hamilton, would you like to sit down? The doctor asked, concerned. No, I need to see him. Now, she nodded. Room 212, second floor. He may be sleeping. The medication makes patients drowsy. Lewis thanked her mechanically and headed for the elevator. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket. Team members, friends, journalists, all wanting to know what was happening. He ignored them all. Room 212 had a police officer stationed outside, hospital security taking no chances with privacy. The officer recognized Lewis immediately and stepped aside. Lewis paused at the door, suddenly afraid of what he would find inside. Taking a deep breath, he entered the room. The sight of Anthony in the hospital bed stopped Lewis cold. His father, once so strong and vital, looked small against the white sheets. An IV dripped medication into his arm. A monitor beeped quietly, tracking his heartbeat. Anthony's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. The hospital gown made him look vulnerable in a way Lewis had never seen before. For the first time since crossing the finish line at Monaco, Lewis felt tears fill his eyes. The race trophy, the championship points, the media headlines, none of it mattered now. Dad, he said softly, moving to the bedside. Anthony's eyes fluttered open. For a moment, he seemed confused. Then recognition dawned. Lewis, he whispered. The race? Did you win? Even now, that was his first thought. Lewis tried to smile through his tears. Yeah, Dad. I won. Just like we planned. Anthony's fingers trembled as he reached for Lewis's hand. I wanted to tell you so many times, he whispered. But I couldn't bear to be a burden when you were fighting for the championship. Lewis pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, still holding his father's hand. He was shocked by how thin it felt, how fragile. A burden? Dad, how could you think that? Lewis's voice broke. We're family. You should have told me. Anthony's eyes filled with tears. I've spent my whole life trying to make your path easier, not harder. That's what fathers do. And sons take care of their fathers when they're sick, Lewis countered. That's what family does. For a long moment, they sat in silence. The beeping, monitors the only sound in the room. Outside, the sun was setting over Monaco. The post-race celebrations continued across the city. But here, in this quiet room, a different reality existed. How long have you known? Lewis finally asked. January, right after New Year's. Anthony's voice was weak but clear. They gave me 6 months with treatment, maybe a year if I was lucky. Lewis did the math quickly. 6 months. That's July. That's still. Anthony shook his head slowly. The text I got during the race. The treatment stopped working. Cancer's spread to my lungs now. Time's running short. Lewis felt like he couldn't breathe. 6 months had suddenly become, what, days? Weeks? The doctor's words echoed in his mind. Maybe only days. "Why did you leave during the race?" Lewis asked. "When you got the text, why not wait until I finished?" Anthony's eyes met his son's. "I couldn't bear it, Lewis. For the first time in my life, I couldn't be strong for you. I was going to break down. And I couldn't let you see that on the biggest race day of the year. I couldn't let the cameras capture that moment." "I would have understood," Lewis insisted. "You would have been distracted, worried, maybe made a mistake." Anthony's grip tightened slightly on Lewis's hand. "Monaco doesn't forgive mistakes." Lewis shook his head in disbelief. Even now, even here, his father was thinking about his racing career first. "The race doesn't matter," Lewis said firmly. "Not compared to this. Not compared to you." Anthony smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong. The racing always mattered. Not for the trophies or the money or the fame. It mattered because it was our dream. Together." Lewis felt tears slide down his cheeks. He didn't bother wiping them away. "Remember that first go-kart?" Anthony continued, his voice growing softer. "How excited you were. How you slept next to it that first night?" "I remember," Lewis said, smiling despite his tears. "You bought it, with your Christmas bonus. Mum was so mad at you." "Worth every penny," Anthony whispered. "Best investment I ever made." Outside the room, voices grew louder. Hospital staff, security, probably dealing with the press gathering outside. None of it mattered to the two men inside. "I'm sorry," Anthony said suddenly, "for the way things went between us, for the years we lost." Lewis shook his head. "Don't apologize. I'm the one who ended our professional relationship. I pushed you away. You needed to grow, to become your own man. I understand that now." "But we lost so much time," Lewis said, regret heavy in his voice. "Time we could have had together." Anthony's eyes grew distant. "Time is strange. We think we have so much of it, until suddenly we don't." He looked back at Lewis. "I've been thinking a lot about time lately, about how we spend it, about what matters." "And what does matter?" Lewis asked softly. "This," Anthony said simply. "Being here with you. Not the races, not the championships. Just this." A nurse entered the room, checking Anthony's vital signs and adjusting his medication. She worked quietly, respecting their conversation. "Your levels are stable, Mr. Hamilton," she said. "The pain medication should be helping. Are you comfortable?" Anthony nodded. "Much better now that my son is here." After she left, Lewis leaned closer to his father. "What can I do? There must be something. Other treatments? Specialists? Money is no object. We could fly anywhere. Try anything." Anthony shook his head gently. "Lewis, I've tried everything. The best doctors, the most aggressive treatments. Some battles can't be won, no matter how hard you fight." Lewis couldn't accept that. He had never accepted defeat in racing, and he couldn't accept it now. "There's always a way. We just need to find it." "Not this time," Anthony said with quiet certainty. "And that's okay. I've had a good life. I've seen my son become not just a champion, but a good man. What more could a father ask for?" Lewis felt his chest tighten with emotion. All the championships, all the victories suddenly seemed meaningless compared to this moment. The Monaco trophy sat forgotten in the Mercedes garage. Lewis hadn't even thought to bring it. Now he realized his father might never get to hold it. "I should have brought your trophy," Lewis said regretfully. Anthony smiled. "I don't need to hold a trophy to know my son is a champion." As the evening deepened into night, they talked as they hadn't in years, about the early days in karting, about the sacrifices Anthony had made, about the good times and the hard times, about everything except the limited time they had left. In the quiet moments between stories, Lewis studied his father's face, memorizing every detail, the strength that still showed despite the illness, the kindness in his eyes, the determination that had carried them both through so many challenges. "You know what I'm proudest of?" Anthony asked as midnight approached. "What?" Lewis asked. "That you found your voice, that you stand up for what's right. The racing is amazing, but the man you've become, that's what matters most." Lewis held his father's hand tightly, their fingers intertwined just as their lives had always been. "I learned that from you," Lewis said softly. "Everything good in me came from you." In that hospital room, with the world shut outside, father and son found again what they had nearly lost, the connection that had once been the center of both their lives. Anthony's eyes grew heavy as the medication took effect. "Will you stay?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "I'm not going anywhere," Lewis promised. "Not this time." As Anthony drifted to sleep, Lewis continued holding his hand, making a silent promise. No more missed moments, no more distance. Whatever time they had left, days, weeks, or the miracle of months, he would be there, just as his father had always been there for him. The championship would continue. The races would go on. But Lewis Hamilton had discovered what truly mattered, what had always mattered most, and it wasn't about crossing finish lines at all. Where are you listening from today? I'd love to know which corner of the world this story reached. If you enjoyed this tale of family, sacrifice, and what truly matters in life, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We share these kinds of heartfelt, inspiring stories regularly. Don't forget to share this video with friends and family who might appreciate it. In a world that sometimes moves too fast, stories like these remind us to cherish our loved ones and the time we have together. Spreading kindness and awareness is just one click away. Your share might be exactly what someone needs to hear today. Until our next story, take care and remember that life's true victories aren't always found at finish lines.